I knew my parents were going to cancel my 25th birthday before the cake was even ordered. Not because they forgot, because my sister always found a way to make sure they did. For years, every graduation, promotion, holiday, and achievement somehow became about her. And every time, my parents ran to her side. When my birthday finally arrived, I told myself things would be different. I was wrong. 3 hours before the party, my mother called, crying. My sister had another emergency. The celebration was canceled. Everyone left, including my parents. That was the last day they saw me for 9 years. My name is Olivia Parker, and I was 25 years old when I finally realized my parents were never going to choose me. Looking back, I should have understood it much earlier. The signs had been there my entire life. My younger sister, Chloe, had always been the center of our family's universe. If she got a good grade, we celebrated. If she had a bad day, everyone stopped what they were doing to come for her. If I achieved something important, it usually became a footnote in whatever crisis Chloe happened to be having that week. At first, I told myself that was just how families worked. Then it became a pattern I couldn't ignore. When I graduated college with honors, Chloe suddenly needed emotional support after a breakup. When I got my first management position, Chloe announced she wanted to change careers and needed everyone's attention. Even holidays somehow became about her. Every time I thought things might change, they didn't. Still, I loved my parents, and despite everything, I kept hoping. By 25, I had built a solid life for myself. I had a good job, my own apartment, and enough savings to feel independent. For the first time in years, my parents suggested organizing a proper birthday celebration. Not a quick dinner. Not a last-minute cake. An actual party. Family. Friends. Everyone together. Part of me was excited. Another part was waiting for something to go wrong. 3 days before my birthday, Chloe started acting strangely. She called my mother repeatedly, sent dramatic messages, kept hinting that she was dealing with something serious. Nobody knew exactly what it was. Whenever someone asked, she would say, "I'll be fine," which usually meant she wanted people to keep asking. I immediately felt that familiar knot forming in my stomach. I had seen this movie before. The timing was too perfect. But when I mentioned my concerns to my mother, she frowned. "Not everything is about attention, Olivia." I apologized, even though deep down I wasn't convinced. The morning of my birthday arrived. For a few hours, everything seemed normal. Friends texted me. Relatives confirmed they were coming. The restaurant was reserved. The cake was ready. I actually started believing I had been wrong. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. The moment I heard her voice, I knew. "Sweetheart," she said. "There's been an emergency." I closed my eyes. What happened? "Chloe needs us." Of course she did. According to my mother, Chloe had called in tears claiming she was dealing with a major personal crisis. Nobody could explain exactly what had happened. Nobody had seen any evidence. But that didn't matter. Within minutes, my parents had canceled everything. The restaurant reservation, the family gathering, the celebration. Gone. Just like that. Guests started receiving calls. Relatives changed their plans. One by one, the messages arrived. "Sorry. Maybe next year. Hope everything works out." I sat alone in my apartment staring at decorations that suddenly felt ridiculous. 25 years old. And somehow I was still losing to the same game. A few hours later, I drove to my parent house. I found them packing bags, preparing to leave for Chloe's apartment. Neither of them seemed surprised to see me. "You're really going?" I asked. My father sighed. "Your sister needs support." What about me? The question hung in the room. Nobody answered immediately. That silence told me everything. Finally, my mother stepped forward. "You understand, don't you?" No. I didn't. And for the first time in my life, I stopped pretending that I did. I looked around the house where I'd spent my childhood. The house where I had spent years hoping things would improve. Then I nodded. Not because I agreed. Because I was done arguing. I walked out without another word. Neither parent followed me. Neither asked me to stay. As I drove away, tears blurred the road ahead. But beneath the heartbreak was something unexpected. Clarity. For years, I had waited for my family to choose me. That night, I finally accepted the truth. They never would. And as the city lights disappeared behind me, I made a decision that would change the next 9 years of my life. The morning after my birthday, I packed everything that mattered into my car and left. Not dramatically, not angrily, just quietly. By then, I had learned something important. People only change when they want to. And my parents had spent 25 years proving they didn't want to. I moved 3 states away for a new position with a growing marketing firm. Nobody in my new city knew about Chloe. Nobody knew about canceled birthdays. Nobody knew what it felt like to spend years competing for attention you should never have had to compete for in the first place. For the first time in my life, I felt free. The first year wasn't easy. There were moments when I picked up my phone, thinking about calling home. Moments when I wondered if I had overreacted. Moments when I missed the version of my family I wished existed. But every time I thought about reaching out, I remembered that birthday. I remembered standing in my parents' living room while they packed bags for Chloe. I remembered the silence when I asked, "What about me?" And I put the phone back down. Months became years. Years became a new life. My career grew faster than I ever expected. I earned promotions, led major projects, eventually became regional director for one of the company's largest divisions. I bought a townhouse, made close friends, built a life that felt stable, healthy, peaceful. The strange thing about distance is that it eventually stops feeling like distance. After enough time, it simply becomes normal. I stopped expecting birthday calls, stopped checking holiday messages, stopped wondering if my parents missed me, because whether they did or didn't no longer changed anything. Occasionally, updates reached me through relatives. Most of them involved Chloe. She had another career change, another relationship problem, another emergency, another crisis. The details changed. The pattern never did. And apparently, my parents were still running to rescue her every time. 9 years passed. 9 birthdays. 9 Christmases. 9 years without seeing any of them. Then one Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. I was reviewing reports in my office when my assistant knocked on the door. "Package for you." I thanked her and glanced at the envelope. The return address immediately caught my attention. A law office in my hometown. For several seconds, I just stared at it. I almost threw it away. Instead, I opened it. Inside was a letter. Not from my parents. From their attorney. The message was brief. My parents were requesting a meeting. The matter was described as important and time-sensitive. No further explanation. I laughed out loud. 9 years. 9 years of silence. And suddenly they wanted a meeting. I folded the letter and tossed it into a drawer. Problem solved. Or so I thought. 2 days later, the attorney called personally. I almost ignored it. Curiosity got the better of me. "Ms. Parker," he said carefully, "your parents understand they have no right to ask anything of you." "Then why are they asking?" A pause followed. "The situation has changed significantly." I leaned back in my chair. "What does that mean?" "I'm afraid that's a conversation they would prefer to have in person." I hated that answer, mostly because it worked. For the next week, memories I hadn't thought about in years started resurfacing. The birthday, the canceled party, the long drive away, the life I left behind. Eventually, curiosity became stronger than resentment. Not forgiveness, not hope, just curiosity. So I agreed to one meeting, one conversation, nothing more. 3 weeks later, I drove back to my hometown for the first time in nearly a decade. Everything looked smaller than I remembered. The streets, the buildings, even the memories. The attorney's office occupied the top floor of a downtown building. My hands felt strangely heavy as I stepped off the elevator. A receptionist pointed toward a conference room. I walked down the hallway, reached for the handle, and opened the door. For the first time in 9 years, I saw my parents sitting on the other side of the table waiting for me. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The room felt smaller than it actually was. My parents looked older than I remembered. My father's hair was almost completely gray. My mother seemed tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. Neither of them looked like the confident people who had once believed they always knew what was best. I sat down across from them. The attorney quietly left the room. The door clicked shut behind him. Still, nobody spoke. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming." I nodded but said nothing. My mother's eyes were already filled with tears. That surprised me. For years, I had imagined this moment. I thought I would feel angry, maybe satisfied. Instead, I mostly felt detached, like I was watching someone else's family. My father folded his hands together. "We owe you an apology." The words landed heavily. Not because I hadn't wanted to hear them, because I had stopped expecting them. My mother looked down. "We should have listened to you years ago." I remained silent. My father took a deep breath. "Everything finally came apart 3 years after you left." I frowned slightly. What happened? The answer came from my mother. "Chloe." Of course it did. Apparently, the emergencies never stopped. They became more frequent, more dramatic, more urgent. Every problem required immediate attention. Every crisis demanded complete focus. And every time, my parents rushed to help, just like they always had. Until one day, the story fell apart. A supposed emergency turned out to be completely fabricated. Then another. Then another. Over time, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Friends started questioning things. Relatives noticed inconsistencies. Even people close to Chloe began pointing out contradictions. Eventually, my parents were forced to confront something they had spent years avoiding. They had been manipulated. Repeatedly. For decades. My father shook his head slowly. "We kept making excuses." My mother wiped her eyes. "We thought we were helping her." The sadness in her voice sounded genuine. For the first time, I believe she truly understood the damage. Not just herself. To me. "Do you know what hurt the most?" I asked quietly. Both of them looked at me. It wasn't Chloe. They seemed surprised. It was knowing that every time there was a choice, you already knew who you'd pick. Silence filled the room. Neither tried to argue. Because they couldn't. My father looked away. "We missed so much." I nodded. Yes. They had. Promotions. Achievements. Birthdays. New homes. Entire chapters of my life. Gone. Not because they couldn't be there. Because they chose not to be. My mother reached into her purse and removed a small envelope. "I've carried this for years." She handed it to me. Inside was a birthday card. The front showed the number 25. My 25th birthday. I opened it carefully. The message inside was unfinished. Apparently, she had started writing it years ago but never mailed it. Several lines were crossed out. Others were smudged. At the bottom was a single sentence. "I'm sorry we weren't there." My eyes lingered on the words. 9 years late, but honest. My father leaned forward. "We can't change what happened." "No," I said. "We can't." Another silence followed. Then my mother spoke. "We're not asking for everything to go back to normal." Good. Because that was impossible. We just wanted the chance to tell you the truth. I looked at both of them. The people I had spent years resenting. The people who had hurt me. The people who finally understood why. Forgiveness wasn't simple. Neither was healing. But something felt different. Not fixed. Just honest. For the first time, nobody was pretending anymore. When the meeting ended, I stood and picked up my coat. My mother hugged me. Briefly. Carefully. As though she knew trust couldn't be rebuilt in a single afternoon. She was right. Outside, the afternoon sun reflected off the windows of nearby buildings. I paused before walking to my car. 9 years earlier, I had left believing I wasn't important enough to stay. Now I understood something better. Their failure to value me had never determined my worth. I built a life anyway. A good one. And sometimes the strongest form of healing isn't revenge. It's learning that you never needed anyone's permission to matter.